It all began on a rainy evening in Seattle, Washington, when 26-year-old David Miller sat down at his desk with a steaming cup of coffee. David wasn't just an average young man tinkering with his computer. He had a deep fascination with cybersecurity. By day, he worked as a software engineer at a small startup, but by night, he became something else entirely: a digital guardian, someone who enjoyed tracking down online scammers and exposing their schemes. He never did it for fame or money, but for the satisfaction of knowing he had protected countless people from being exploited. On this particular evening, David had just logged into one of his virtual machines when his phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from an elderly man named George Parker, a retired schoolteacher from Ohio. George's message was desperate, almost heartbreaking. He had been tricked into giving access to his computer by a smooth-talking tech support agent who claimed his bank account was compromised. The scammer, who introduced himself as Michael, convinced George to transfer over $2,500 to a secure account. George realized too late that it was all a scam. David had heard this story far too many times before. These scammers, often working from crowded call centers, targeted elderly and vulnerable people, convincing them their computers were infected, and then draining their bank accounts. It was cruel, heartless, and relentless. But what George didn't know was that his story would become the spark for one of David's most daring digital counterattacks yet. David carefully reviewed the details George sent, including the phone number Michael had used and the remote access software installed on George's computer. After an hour of analyzing, David smiled slightly. The scammer had been sloppy. The remote tool still carried traces of the scammer's network information. This was the crack David needed to slip through. He spun up a separate machine, layered with VPNs and firewalls, and began his digital journey. Using his expertise, he carefully tunneled through the scammer's exposed connections. Within minutes, David found himself looking at the scammer's control panel. It was a server filled with folders upon folders of victims' personal data, scanned IDs, bank details, phone recordings, and even family photographs the scammers had stolen from infected computers. David's stomach twisted in disgust. These weren't just numbers on a screen. These were real people. Grandparents, single parents, hard-working families, all violated by this faceless network of thieves. He knew he had two options: quietly back away and report it, or take the fight directly to the scammer. For David, the choice was obvious. He began methodically deleting the files. Thousands of them. One by one, whole folders disappeared. Years of stolen data, gone in minutes. As he deleted, he pictured the scammers on the other side watching their empire crumble, panicking as everything they had built vanished before their eyes. But David wasn't reckless. Before erasing everything, he carefully downloaded logs, chat transcripts, and most importantly, location pings from the scammer's sloppy setup. They pointed not just to an IP address, but to a physical office building in Dallas, Texas. This wasn't overseas. This was right here in the United States. That realization both shocked and fueled him further. Across the city in Dallas, inside a dingy office on the 5th floor of an abandoned strip mall, the scammer himself, Anthony Roberts, sat with a headset wrapped around his ears. Anthony wasn't a mastermind. He was just another cog in the machine, a man in his 30s with an endless stream of scripts and victims to target. His small team worked out of the dimly lit office, littered with energy drink cans, half-broken computers, and stolen notes. They thought they were untouchable. That night, as Anthony leaned back in his chair, boasting to one of his colleagues about how easy it was to trick old people, his screen suddenly flashed red. Folders were disappearing faster than he could react. He cursed loudly, slamming the keyboard, but it was useless. No matter what he clicked, the files evaporated. The victim database, the payment records, the fake invoices, everything was gone. "Who's doing this?" Anthony shouted, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. His colleagues rushed over, but their systems too were collapsing. It was as if a ghost had slipped into their machines. Back in Seattle, David watched calmly. He had wiped nearly everything, but he wasn't finished. He pulled together the evidence he had gathered: names, fake bank accounts, and even Anthony's personal login credentials. He compiled them neatly into a file and sent them to the Dallas Police Department's cybercrime unit. Along with the report, David added the physical coordinates of the office. He didn't need to remain anonymous, but he chose to. What mattered was that justice was served. The next morning, the Dallas police acted swiftly. Guided by the digital evidence, they raided the office. Officers stormed through the broken glass doors, catching Anthony and his team completely off guard. Desktops were seized, hard drives confiscated, and the scammers were handcuffed one by one. For once, the victims had won. News of the raid made local headlines: "Police bust scammer ring in Dallas, thousands saved from online fraud." The report highlighted how the scammers had stolen millions over the years but had finally been stopped thanks to an anonymous cyber vigilante. George Parker, the retired teacher, read the article with tears in his eyes. He didn't know who this vigilante was, but he felt a deep sense of gratitude. He wasn't just relieved about his lost money, he was relieved to know no one else would suffer the same way. Meanwhile, David simply sipped his coffee as he read the article online. He didn't feel like a hero, nor did he want recognition. He only felt satisfaction knowing he had deleted thousands of stolen files, stripped power from a scammer, and handed justice to the authorities. But perhaps the most important part for David was this: every time scammers thought they were clever, every time they thought they could hide, there would always be someone like him, someone watching, someone willing to fight back. And as he shut down his computer that night, a faint smile crossed his face. He knew this was only the beginning. Because somewhere, right now, another scammer was dialing another innocent victim. And David was ready.